Roger.
Well,
The last time I had, I was, well, anyway, I made it, and I'm here.
Good.
Well,
I'm grateful, and I'm just in no pain. I'm happy that
You can drive at night, right?
I'm driving now.
I'm just working on the technology over here. What's that?
Thanks to you, he was able to.
Yes. Well, thanks to Terry for coordinating it all. I helped
But
initially.
see,
but-
when you try to get a lawyer and you really need one,
Oh, God, we got somebody in this office.
that took 3 times to get a lawyer to even take
Hmm.
my case. But anyway, I'm hearing as in the past, it ended about 2 weeks ago, after a year and a half, and that's just wonderful. So, I was hit by a car, but I didn't know that's old.
Well, it sounds like everything is on.
Well.
Okay. There is quite a delay that we get, which is so funny. I don't know. Yeah.
Sure.
I think that's just the way it's going to be.
Still
So.
working now, not really.
Well, I would if I could. I mean, I would that my work. Were you able to get a hold of Bob?
Yeah.
Yes, I did.
She was working up to that.
Called him.
All right,
and
so
left a
testing-
message, and he called me back.
Testing the
He didn't
microphone.
call you back?
He did.
Oh, good.
He said he-
Testing the microphone.
he was doing it today, so he couldn't-
Testing the microphone.
He tried to make it-
But he knows about the money.
Testing the microphone.
California.
Hello. Oh, hi there. I'm Paul.
I'm Jerry.
Hi. Did we talk on the phone?
We did not.
Oh, Carol.
I think Carol.
Welcome to the group. We got to get some more chairs.
Hi.
Yeah, hi there.
I'm Deborah. I
Deborah?
know you from Sanctuary Yoga. I used to go to your yoga.
Oh my gosh. Well, how
theory
cool is
class.
that?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're glad you're here. How's it going?
With Louise.
We met in
Free.
yoga
Yeah.
before. Yes.
Roger, well,
Glad to have you.
Ivan, there's two here.
Ivan,
yes.
good to meet you. How did you come to be here today? Oh, I thought it. All right. Good to have you, Ivan. This is great. All right, we'll get some more chairs, definitely. Yeah.
Do you want that over there or over here? Roger will find some more chairs.
This is great.
Terry, nice to meet you, Louise. Louise.
I'm sorry, Louise. Okay. Sorry.
We do yoga together. Hot yoga.
Stephanie.
Can I help you grab some chairs?
Yeah, there's more back there.
We need a few more.
We need more.
One. One of my friends from yoga.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, what?
Hello.
Hi, this is such a surprise,
Good.
right?
Good to see
I'm
you.
glad you're here. And you brought a friend too. I know.
Hello.
Hi, how's it going? I'm
Good.
Paul.
I'm Carol. You're Paul.
Hey,
Hi.
Carol. We talked on the phone.
And we did.
Yes.
We did. There's 3 more coming in
Oh,
behind.
goodness gracious.
Yeah.
This is wonderful. Well, come on in. This is great. Good to see you as well. Good to see you. Oh, that's so good. All right. Cool.
Hi.
Hmm.
Listen, the rest of your light are on the door.
Yes.
Either way.
Oh,
Right.
They're all here.
Oh, they're all here.
Yeah, we just need one more.
Well, all right. The chairs are coming. Okay, good.
Oh, which way?
Walk goes this way. And I know I've been this way. They can go either way to get to the
They're
rest of right.
actually right behind here, so you can go either way. There's a little hallway here.
Okay. Here you are. Good. This is good.
That's good.
How
I'm ready.
are you? Good.
You can sit right there. Whatever, I can live down.
What did you say, 6 people?
Here, you can sit here.
I didn't.
She's already planted.
All right. Looks like Barry Brown's online. Hey, Barry. Hey, Stephanie Jillian. Yoga Bunny. And I want to make sure they can hear us, though. So, oh, Barry says, what's up, Paul? All right. All right.
Do we need to have everybody introduce themselves and then you can announce where this is?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. So we have a room mic. Turn that down. All right.
Masawa, right?
Yeah.
Who needs water?
Tango.
We have water.
Water everywhere.
Anybody want some?
No, thank you.
You guys okay? No? No water? Can't give them the water away. Oh, that's terrible. Look, you're just-
Frisian.
That's cool. All right, it's 2:30. Let's get this going.
What's going on here? We should have done this earlier. Longest people trying.
Earlier what? Like early?
Wife. Last year.
No, usually I think of Frisian as white.
Okay.
But I think they use white flowers with a very.
Well, they probably come in different colors. I don't
They
know.
have a scent. Do those have a scent?
Well, she'll
So
be back.
I like
She said-
So the restrooms are behind this wall, not in the hallway. On the other side of the hallway, there's men and women. So help yourself. The cleaning people just cleaned it, so it should be nice and clean. You shouldn't have any complaints.
All right, it's 2:30. Let's get going with this. This is wonderful. This is just so great. Glad to have so many familiar faces and so many new faces as well. So a lot of you might be wondering what this actually is all about. We've got a lot of technology here. So we are going to be actually speaking to you in person and to all of our friends online. So right now we have 6 people online and more will be joining us soon. Most likely we'll have people in Costa Rica online, right, Terry?
Yep.
All throughout the country. We have Northern Oregon coast online. Jessica's here. This is great. All right. So by way of introduction, let's first tell everyone in person. So I'm going to repeat questions as well. We do have microphones. We have one microphone. This gigantic black thing is to pick up our voice up here. And then we have another microphone there, which will do a decent job of picking up questions and discussion from the group so our online students can participate as well. Oh, Jessica says hi, Terry. Once I learn better how to operate Facebook Live, we'll be able to have our online students share their screens as well. So with technology these days, we can do a lot of different things. All right, so I may need to repeat questions for the online students, but by way of introduction, my name is Paul Benedict, and this is Terry Hunt and Roger Freeman. I'll let them tell you about themselves in a moment. We are offering this discussion group. It's more of a discussion group than a class or a lecture through the Theosophical Society. And we'll talk a lot about what that actually is if you haven't heard that before. The Theosophical Society, just generally speaking, is an organization that's international. It's been around since 1875. And the mission of the Theosophical Society is to disseminate the wisdom tradition, which refers to many different things. The wisdom tradition. If we could encapsulate it into 1 or 2 sentences, is to teach spiritual and personal growth from an open-minded perspective. So from Terry's and my background, we teach a parallel, Theosophy, and we also teach Raja Yoga, which is the parallel, the corollary instruction. So in my personal life, I teach physical yoga as well, which is a counterpart to the Raja Yoga, which is the mental or the personal growth side of yoga. So there's a double corollary, Theosophy and Raja Yoga. And this particular series of discussions will be on basic theosophical teachings combined with what Raja Yoga is all about. And the text we're going to use to guide us throughout these sessions is this text here. It's a basic introductory theosophical course. And we have several copies here available. We'll talk more about the book later. Let's do an opening meditation. So please sit up straight and get comfortable. Hey, Hope's online. So we have Central Idaho in the house as well. All right. So an introductory meditation just to calm our vibrations down and tune ourselves up to study spiritual material today. So allow your eyes to just close. The only requirement for a meditative posture is that you're comfortable and that your spine is erect. So just do those two things. Tall spine, so the crown of the head is roughly directly over the base of the spine. Tall spine, and then you have a relative amount of comfort in the body, as comfortable as possible. So the only muscular engagement is that of the muscles around the spinal column, keeping the body erect, the torso erect. Just take a couple of deep breaths, slowly in through the nose, and then out through the nose. Let your hands rest on your legs, on your knees. Let your shoulders just relax. Bring your awareness into your toes and just wiggle the toes a little bit and notice the life in your feet, and then let your feet be still. Just relax them. Just gently move the fingers a little bit. Notice the life energy in your fingers, and then relax the hands altogether. Let them be still. Now bring your attention back to the feet and then slowly move your awareness just up the legs, slowly, ankles, the calves, and just notice the life energy in the physical body. Relaxing the legs, the knees. As you move your attention up, make sure the legs are relaxed. Pelvis is relaxed. Reproductive area is relaxed. No clenching, no tensing. The lower abdomen. Just let your little Buddha belly fall out. No one's watching, I promise. Be comfortable. Just let it go. All the while making sure the breath is smooth. Inhales and exhales are roughly even. Move your awareness into the upper abdomen, the torso. You might even feel your heart beating. So relax the arms now. Shoulders, the upper arms, the elbows, forearms, wrists, hands. Now your neck, jaw, lips, tongue, teeth are just gently apart. Eyeballs, eyelids relaxed, forehead calm, no furrowing of the eyebrows. And now just feel the air coming in and out of the nose. It's a very subtle sensation. See if you can raise your sensitivity just enough to sense the inner walls of the nostrils as the air passes into the body and out of the body. Remember that the spine is erect, everything is relaxed, and you're just sensing the airflow. It's important to note that the physical sensation, the physical air is only one part of what's happening when you breathe. The counterpart to the physical molecules of air going in is that your life energy, the yogis call it prana, rides on that air. So as you sense the body breathe in, know that you're taking in life energy to the body. Vivifying, energizing, life-giving force. And as you exhale, yogis call this the force of apana, the eliminative force, cleansing, releasing. So those two things happen at the same time. When you breathe in physical air, you're also taking in prana. When you breathe out physical air, you're eliminating, cleansing. Feel free to join me in 3 ohms. Inhale. Let that sound continue, even though the physical vibrations might have dissipated. The superphysical vibrations do carry. And then lower the chin and slowly, at your own pace, slowly open the eyes and come back. And welcome back. I heard someone come in.
Hello.
Hi. Hey, how's it going? Oh, there's a chair right there for you.
Thank
Is that okay?
All right, now how many people did we lose online from that first meditation? Is my sister still there? Yeah, Hope's still there. Okay, good. So the purpose of oming is literally what we said before, is to tune up our vibrations. So the physical world is comprised of a series of vibrations within a spectrum. And then as the vibrations become more refined and more fine-tuned, the reality of the vibrations takes you higher and higher through different realms or dimensions. And it's one of the things that spiritual study focuses on, it is the different realms of being, the different realms of existence and consciousness. And when we om, when we use the physical vibration, but the vibratory resonance of our vocal cords, it calms our physical body, it harmonizes, it unifies us. And there's a sacred element to the syllable om as well. It's said that the planet and the solar system and the entire universe itself vibrates at a specific quality. And when we make the sound om, that's the best approximation that human beings can come to mimicking or imitating or attuning with that vibratory quality. So we're not only calming ourselves, but we're attuning ourselves to the universe. So the yogis say.
Those
So.
are the vowels. Say
So I started to introduce ourselves earlier. Now, a good part of this first session will be by way of introduction. Now, not only introducing you to the 3 of us up here, but to the material. So I'm going to just give a little background of why I'm sitting here at the front of the table today and speaking first, and then we'll turn the camera and the spotlight on these 2 awesome gentlemen to my left and right so they can kind of give a little introduction as well. So my introduction to Theosophy came far before I knew what yoga was. Even though yoga is a big part of my life now, Theosophy was introduced to me around 2006, 2007 when I met this guy, Terry. And I was assisting my dear cousin purchase a home. Her name is Bonnie. Some of you know her. Yeah, well. And she was an avid meditator, and I was very curious to know more about meditation. It was intriguing to me, and I was asking her lots of questions and wanted to know, how do I get started? What's meditation all about? What actually is meditation? What's the goal? It seems nebulous and vague, so I want to learn. Well, she said, I know just the guy to teach you about that and more. And that was this gentleman, Terry Hunt. And he and I have since become very close. And so she took me to his home where he was teaching a class on this exact text. And the year, I think, was 2007. We still don't really remember. It might have been 6, might have been 2008, something like that. Time's an illusion anyway. So I started to get as close to this guy as I could. And then I learned about Theosophy. And then it so happened that I was studying the teachings of Eckhart Tolle. Some of you might have heard of him. And he was introduced to me from someone who's online with us today. Her name is Jessica, and she's right there. So for our online people, you can thank her as well for this journey. And Terry had not heard of Eckhart Tolle, but Eckhart Tolle's teaching is exactly complementary to Theosophy, stated in a modern day language. So Theosophy has been around for eons, for as long as human beings have, for as long as life has been around. Eckhart Tolle is a modern day person. He's written 2 major books, and it's basically a restatement of the practical application of the Theosophical teachings in today's language. And it's brilliant. It's how to live the Theosophy, how to live your spiritual growth. What tactical steps do you take to expand your consciousness, to be a better human, to eliminate suffering from yourself and then from others? And I said, Terry, if you don't know who this guy is teaching on the power of now, how to eliminate the ego, you got to check this out. And so he did, and he realized, yes, Eckhart Tolle has a message that hasn't been stated the same way that we've seen from any other writer. So Terry and I decided to teach a class on Eckhart Tolle's book called A New Earth. And we did that in 2009. That took us about 10 months. We married this teaching with Eckhart Tolle's book, A New Earth. And we used Oprah Winfrey's webinar segments in ours, and we used different meditation techniques that Oprah and Eckhart did together. After that 10-month session ended, we realized we had created something new from that marriage as well. And we thought that the new information that we had created through that synthesis needed to be put into a book. So we wrote a book, and the book came out in 2012, July, and I didn't actually bring a copy. We might have one up in that bookshelf somewhere. But that book is called Ancient Wisdom for a New Age, a Practical Guide for Spiritual Growth. And we've done several webinar sessions on that particular book as well. That's not what this session is about, but that is there and available, and the sessions were webcast as well for that. I'm getting messages about how can we find the webcast. Oh, geez. We'll have to address that later. Okay. So our book came out in 2012, and we've done, as I mentioned, subsequent classes and webinars on that book. And that was about the time that I discovered physical yoga as well, through a completely different avenue. Now, physical yoga, when we say the word yoga in the Western Hemisphere, we think of poses, physical body shapes, and kind of like acrobatics, downward dog, upward dog, warrior poses. So that's how I was introduced to yoga, was going to a studio, taking a class from a teacher and getting real hot and sweaty and twisting and stretching and learning how to breathe. I had no idea that yoga is that the physical poses are the counterpart to the mental practices that I've already been doing since 2006 with Theosophy. Only when I dove deeper into the teachings of yoga history and yoga philosophy did I realize yoga philosophy is just this, what we're talking about, spiritual growth. And the physical poses, they're just one small little tactical, practical step in the giant path and teaching and world of what yoga philosophy offers and can do. So 2012, 2013, that's when I began to realize that the physical yoga was a counterpart to the mental yoga that I'd already been practicing. I went to a yoga teacher training in 2013, learned how to teach physical classes, and I've been on a mission ever since then to incorporate as much spiritual growth and super physical information and teachings into my physical yoga classes as possible, because I feel that that's severely lacking in many of the yoga classes in the Western world. Because if you go to the East, if you travel to India and you say, let's go to a yoga class, you'll find people that are sitting like this and they're practicing yoga, and they're, okay, let's do yoga. And they're just, But here in the West, you're like, what are you doing? That's not yoga. Let's go do some Bikram or some hot and sweaty vinyasa or something like that. So we'll fast forward till today, and here we are still teaching Theosophy and yoga philosophy, and we're trying to reach as many people as possible, hence all the technology here. So, all right. Now, that was a very quick synopsis. Now, which of you would like to go next? Okay. Let's turn the camera for a second. I'm going to just quickly do a real quick panorama of the entire room so our online students can just see all of our amazing guests here. There's Terry. And as always, we appreciate all the participation. All right. So this is Roger Freeman. He owns this office that we're in now. Longtime friend of ours and member of the Theosophical Society. Let's turn that microphone, Roger, towards you. That silver one. Cool. Just tell us how you came to Theosophy, a little bit about what you do.
Well, I'm a card-carrying member because of this guy over here. There was a point in time that I was with some people and we were searching for how to do what we wanted to do, and came to Terry. And Terry, one thing about Terry, he'll never ever ask me again to make another list of things that we should study, because I remember that? I made a list, and we spent 3 years studying them. Anyway, the thing that hooked me to Theosophy more than anything else is one of their creeds is we don't care what religion you are, we hope you practice it. But by the way, can we study your religion? And I love to study religion. I love to study history. So that's brought me to this point in time. How's that for short and sweet?
Short and sweet.
Okay.
All right. Now you get to have the spotlight. For a minute. There he is, ladies and gentlemen. All right.
All right, very quickly. I discovered Theosophy at the age of 27, which was about the age Paul was when he discovered it. There seems to be something about that age. People who are spiritual in nature seem to, around the age of 25 to 30, be on the search for something. And some people find what they're looking for, and some people don't. Some people are still searching. But once I discovered Theosophy, I knew immediately that's what it was. That's what I had been searching for my whole life, really, but specifically the previous 5 years. So I gave up everything and went to work at the headquarters in Wheaton for a year and a half before going back out into the real world. But I've been studying Theosophy ever since then, and I've not found anything that's any better than Theosophy, other than, as Paul said, the additional teachings of Eckhart Tolle, which was kind of the practical part of Theosophy. Theosophy gives us all of the theory, all of the information that we need about it, but how do you apply it? How do you make it meaningful in your everyday life? That's what we found from studying Eckhart Tolle's teaching. So by putting the two together, we felt that you can't really get any better than that. And then it was only then that we discovered that sum total was absolutely Raja Yoga. There was nothing different between that combination and what Raja Yoga is. So we discovered that part of it late in the game. But one thing HPB, Helena Blavatsky, said in her book, The Key to Theosophy, is that Theosophy is pure ethics. It is pure ethics. If you apply the true principles of Theosophy in your life, you will be a completely, entirely, 100% ethical person in everything you do. So without taking any more time, I just want to say that I've never found anything that has given me better understanding of how life works than the principles of Theosophy.
Good. Yikes. It's bound to happen when I have it perching precariously up on this thing, trying to make it head height. Let's see here. We'll figure out a good way. It's a work in progress. Now, as I mentioned before, please ask questions, offer opinions, and topics for additional discussion. That goes to our online students and to our in-person students as well. So what the heck are we doing here? Let's talk about why we're actually here studying this material at this particular point. And I think a quote from one of my favorite scientists is an excellent way to start off the discussion on why we're here. So many of you know who Carl Sagan is. He has a quote, and it's been referred to as the pale blue dot. Has anyone heard of that little monologue that he's given before? Okay. So to quote Carl Sagan, so when the Voyager 1 probe was 3.7 billion miles from Earth, he says, NASA, please turn around the spaceship and take a photograph of Earth. And once that was done, he says, look at that dot, the earth. That's here. That's home. That's us. On it, everyone you love, everyone you know, everyone you have ever heard of, every human being who ever was, whoever lived out their lives, the aggregate of our joy and suffering, thousands of confident religions, ideologies, and economic doctrines, every hunter and forager, every hero and coward, every creator and destroyer of civilization, every king and peasant, every young couple in love, every mother and father, hopeful child, inventor and explorer, every superstar, every supreme leader lived there, on a mote of dust suspended in a sunbeam. The earth is a very small stage in a vast cosmic arena. Think of the rivers of blood spilled by all those generals and emperors so that in glory and triumph, they could become the momentary masters of a fraction of a dot. Think of the endless cruelties visited by the inhabitants of one corner of this pixel on the scarcely distinguishable inhabitants of some other corner, how frequent their misunderstandings, how eager they are to kill one another, how fervent their hatreds. Our posturings, our imagined self-importance, the delusion that we have some privileged position in the universe, are challenged by this point of pale light. Our planet is a lonely speck in the great enveloping cosmic dark. In our obscurity, in all this vastness, there is no hint that help will come from anywhere else to save us from ourselves. The earth is the only world known so far to harbor life. Side note, he was a believer that there is life out there, but he's saying that earth is the only world that we know to harbor life. There is nowhere else, at least in the near future, to which our species could migrate. Visit, yes, settle, not yet. Like it or not, for the moment, the earth is where we make our stand. It has been said that astronomy is a humbling and character-building experience. There is perhaps no better demonstration of the folly of human conceits than this distant image of our tiny world, the blue dot. To me, it underscores our responsibility to deal more kindly with one another and to preserve and cherish the pale blue dot, the only home we've ever known. So if he's not a theosophist, I don't know what actually would be a theosophist. So what he's saying there is take life from a different perspective. It's amazing that Eckhart Tolle has a very similar quote from one of his books. He talks about seeing life from the perspective of an astronaut, which is a little bit different than being 3.7 billion miles away, but it's getting ourselves out of our funk, the miasma of the forest, right? Rising above the forest because you can't see the whole forest when you're in it, right? Taking life from a different perspective, blasting off into outer space and looking at our problems and seeing if they really are problems. Yeah. So Theosophy helps us do that. It helps us take ourselves out of the context that we get enmeshed in the ruts that we find ourselves in, and see life from what it really is. We talk about raising our vibrations and raising our consciousness. That is what our goal is. That is why we're here. That's why we're studying, learning to see things from a higher perspective, from our higher perspective. We all have this perspective within us if we quiet the chatter of the ego long enough to access it. So let's go on that journey together. And you guys can chime in whenever you want. If I say something wrong, which I'm sure I will, please correct me. All right. Now, a disclaimer. So before I begin any of my classes, we're all students. I'm a student. This guy's a student. He's a student. And nothing that we say should be taken as absolute truth. Don't believe anything we say. As a matter of fact, question what we say and be skeptical. But take it and maybe file the information away in the back of your mind somewhere. And if you choose, apply it in your life and see if it resonates. See if some of these concepts make sense. So a certain amount of faith, maybe. Just use your life as a laboratory. And if you can prove it to yourself. You don't need to prove it in a scientific lab to anybody else. The human passion for understanding ourselves and the world around us puts us all on a quest for self-discovery. It's probably safe to assume that's why a lot of us are sitting here today. So a question for you to ponder: what does spiritual growth mean to you? And if anyone feels like sharing, please do. Spiritual growth means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. We should identify that. You should understand what that actually means, because if you don't have a goal, you're not going to reach anywhere. We should be specific. If we're going to walk this path of spiritual growth, know what it is that we're striving towards. If you believe in a God, define what that actually means. If you have a goal of achieving something in a business, you probably have a business plan. If you have a goal of achieving something in your spiritual life, you should have a specific, you should even put it in writing. You know, in the movie, what is that? The Secret, they talk about putting something out into the universe. You know, if you put it in writing, some power comes behind that somehow. Okay. Some logistics of the class here. We talked about restrooms. Just so you guys know, they're all right around the corner here. I can't tell our online people where their restrooms are. They could be in the restroom right now, for all we know. Don't tell anyone, but sometimes I do that. With your phone, no one knows unless we ask them to share their screen with us. Yeah. Don't share your screen online. Right. We'll be meeting every other Sunday, roughly, twice a month. And of course, you can be online if you choose. So the book. Now, let's talk about the book now. So this book has 12 chapters in it. And each of our sessions here will roughly correspond with one chapter. Sometimes we won't finish a chapter because I like to talk a lot, and so do these guys. Actually, he likes to talk more than anyone. So sometimes our sessions won't even cover a full chapter. So it'll take roughly 12 sessions, maybe 14 or 15 sessions, and you're not required to come to all or any of them. We have a few copies for sale here at $10. They're available on Amazon too. Where else can they get those?
Quest Books.
Questbooks.com probably, yeah. .net, okay. Now, from time to time, we're going to be referencing the Yoga Sutras as well. Has anyone not heard of the Yoga Sutras before?
Do you have any Yoga Sutra books with you today?
I do.
I would like one.
Oh, I don't have them for sale. I brought them, but
I
not
want
for...
this for her.
Okay. So as I've mentioned several times, we're teaching a double corollary, Theosophy and Yoga. So it's important for you to know what the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali are. So if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to give you a little history on that. Okay. So what the heck are the Yoga Sutras? I might ask my friend Jillian in the back to chime in because she sat for 8 hours listening to me in Hawaii about what the Yoga Sutras are, right? How much of that 8 hours do you remember from Hawaii?
All of it.
All of it. That's the right answer. That's the right answer. Exactly. That was so fun, right? And that, I got a Facebook notification today that was literally 1 year ago today when we were doing our session in Hawaii.
I know, I keep getting all these memories.
Mhm.
Like, oh.
Yeah. It was a Zeke Vincent training that she flew all the way there for and everything. It was very, very special. So, all right. So since we'll be referencing the Yoga Sutras quite a bit, let's talk about what they are. So yoga philosophy is not a religion. It's a tradition. It's been taught by many wise sages or wise people over the years. And there's one authoritative text that is the most popular on yoga philosophy and yoga wisdom. And it wasn't even written by the guy it's accredited to. It was compiled. So compiled means he was the one with the foresight and the wherewithal to take the oral teachings that had been around for millennia and to codify them and put them into a sequential, succinct teaching of 196 sentences or sutras. The word sutra is a Sanskrit word that literally translates to thread or suture, a thread of wisdom. It's a short statement of knowledge. And in the particular teaching called the Yoga Sutras, there are 196 of these arranged into 4 different chapters. And it's the teaching of yoga philosophy. And it's very, very interesting to note that in this teaching, all of the yoga that we know in the world has been derived. All of the yoga. So all the physical postures, all the yoga studios, it started with the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali. Curiously enough, out of the 196 sutras, there are a grand total of 4 that describe physical postures. Jillian remembered that part because that was shocking.
I thought it was 30.
You know what? The 4th one that I'm adding right now is where he just lists all 8 limbs. He just lists them. So asana is one of that, but there are 3 that describe them. So that was actually very good that you remember. There are 3 that describe it. The 4th one is where he just lists all 8 limbs. So there really are 3 here. And so what are the other 190? What's 196 minus 4? 192. Okay. What are the other 192 about? About how to calm the mind, about how to calm the ego, how to get rid of the mind chatter. That's what yoga is in a classical sense. That's why I said a while ago, if you go to India and you say, let's go to practice yoga, they're going to be meditating, that we're doing yoga. because that is the practice of calming the mind so you can reach your higher self. Now, the ego is a curious thing. It's there for a very specific reason, and it's there as the biggest deterrent, the biggest blockage, the biggest speed bump to reaching our highest potential. So it's there for a good reason, but then we have to realize how to put it in its place.
It's kind of like the booster rocket. It's necessary to get to a certain point, but then if you don't get rid of it, it becomes an impediment.
True.
And then you're stuck. That you can't make any more progress, and you may actually fail. So you have to get rid of it, and that's what propels you to that point where you can go beyond it. You use the mind also to get to a certain point, and then true meditation occurs when you let the mind go and when you go beyond the mind. So ego and mind, two different things. They are tools that we have to use in life, but at a certain point it is expedient to let go of it.
You've heard many times, I'm sure, about the path or the spiritual path that aspirants or seekers walk on. Well, the path has different levels. It's like different rungs in a ladder. And many of those rungs require the ego, as Terry just said. The ego is what impels us to experience things. What is the purpose of life? Now, that's one of the big questions that Theosophy asks. I want you to think about it, because I'll be coming around to you individually and asking you to tell me what the purpose of life is. Just kidding, I won't do that. But feel free to chime in. So one of the postulations is that the purpose of life is simply to experience, to grow by experience. And the ego, at certain rungs of this spiritual growth ladder, the ego is what drives that experience. If we didn't have any need, any want, we wouldn't have any motivation to get out of bed in the morning and to go try things and to go think about animals. The peacock, what is the purpose of the peacock's tail? Is to show off, to get the woman, to get the girl, and to go out and reproduce. You know, that same type of attitude spills over into the human realm all over the place. Everywhere you look, there's this idea of showing off, of trying to grasp and reach and acquire and obtain. And then once we reach a certain rung on this ladder, we'll realize what's really happening there. Okay, I see what's going on there. Do I really need to show off and post this thing on Facebook about my handstand that I just did? I don't think I need to post that anymore. I think I'm moving beyond that. So at some point in the ladder that we're climbing, we'll realize what the ego, what it is first of all, and how it's working for us or working against us. All right. There are many, many books on the Yoga Sutras, and I encourage you all to get one or two or several and compare them. I brought 3 here to talk about. It's important to know why there are so many different books on the Yoga Sutras. There are 196 sutras, like I mentioned. Now, these 3 books contain the same 196 sutras, right? But why is one that thick, one that thick, and one that thick? Well, first of all, the 196 have to be translated from the Sanskrit language, which is called Devanagari script, into Roman characters and then into English. So the process of interpreting changes the length and the message itself. And then the sutras themselves are cryptic in nature. They're short on purpose, because in the ancient days, they were transmitted only orally. So the students had to memorize them. The guru had to teach them orally to their disciples before there were printing presses and Wikipedia. So that's why they're short. Now, when Patanjali put them together into the 196, they're very short on purpose, and they come to life when they're taught by the author or the teacher. Now, these books are the teaching of the sutras. Each book gives the sutra itself and then a commentary. The commentary might be 1 paragraph, might be 5 paragraphs, might be 5 pages, depending on the depth and profundity of the sutra that is being commentated on. And that's why there's such a large variance of sizes of books here. Terry's and my favorite one is this one right here. It's called The Science of Yoga by a guy named I.K. Taimni. One of the reasons why it's our favorite is because Taimni was a theosophist. So he approaches the Yoga Sutras from a theosophical point of view. This book here is what a lot of the yoga teacher trainings in the Western world use as one of their course materials. It's just called simply the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, translation and commentary by Sri Swami Satchidananda. So fun to say. We should all say it together. Sri Swami Satchidananda. Again, the same 196, just in different levels of detail and expansion. Then this one, this book I appreciate as well because this is the teacher, this guy, Rajmani Tigunayat, is the teacher of the yoga teacher that I'm studying with. So I'm studying with a yoga teacher in Colorado named Rod Stryker, and this is his teacher. And they are part of an organization called the Himalayan Institute. So this book is unique because this thickness is actually just the first of 4 chapters. So we thought this guy expounded a lot on the sutras. This is only the first chapter, which is called Samadhi Pada. And his second book is out on the second chapter, Sadhana Pada, and there will be 2 more for the 3rd and 4th chapter. So you can see the difference in commentary. Same sutras, just taught from a different perspective. So we'll be referencing the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali quite a bit during our course here. It's kind of important to note the Yoga Sutras are the tactics. Control of breath, control of posture. I know I asked Roger to turn the air down. Maybe we turned it down too much. Everyone's getting cold now.
I've turned it off.
Oh, it's off now. Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
So the yoga philosophy is the tactics. It tells us what to do. In the second chapter, Sadhana Pada, sadhana means practice. Patanjali lays out an 8-step path. Now, the entire teaching is far more deep and involved than just the 8-step section. But the 8-step section encapsulates the entire teaching into eight simple steps towards enlightenment. And it tells you what to do in order to achieve spiritual enlightenment, right? The first 2 limbs, they call it, are the ethics and morals of how to live your life. And there happen to be 10. So at the first one, there are 5. The second one, there are 5. And those roughly correspond to the 10 commandments in Christianity and other moral regulations in other religions. And then limbs 3 and 4 have to do with the physical body, asana, the poses we practice, then breathing techniques. And then the 5th limb of the 8 has to do with learning to control the senses, so we can learn how to go inward during our meditation instead of always focusing on shiny things and looking to grasp and grab and be annoyed, being attracted and repulsed, closing that off so we can turn inward. And then the limbs 6, 7, and 8 is what is referred to as the inner journey, which is how specifically to calm the mind so you can transcend it. And it's very simple. Limb 6 is focus, learning to focus. Limb 7 is learning to contemplate. And the 8th limb is what's called samadhi. And samadhi is that state where your consciousness is leaving your physical body and it's merging with the object of contemplation, whether it's a microphone, whether it's another human being, a loved one, whether it's the creator of the earth, the sun, it could be a situation. It's transcendence, right? So those are the 8 steps. That's the tactical part. Now, why I love this double corollary thing so much is because the yoga philosophy gives us those steps, but Theosophy gives us the worldview. It gives us how to see that pale blue dot from the highest perspective possible, and then to understand our place on that dot. As insignificant or significant as it may seem, we need to understand why we're here, where we're going. So the theory and the philosophy and the worldview comes from Theosophy, and the actual steps, the tactics, come from the yoga. And that's why we think it's a great marriage and combination. Sound good so far?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
I'm glad I let him do this instead of me.
All right, now that class is almost over, we can actually start with the material. No, it's all right, it's 3:30. Let's make sure our online people can still hear us. Hey, Amanda's there, Leslie's there, Felicia, hey everyone. We have a response. Felicia, she listened to the question that I asked about what does spiritual growth mean to you? And she says, spiritual growth means that we are evolving in our vision, our beliefs, our faith, our understanding, and our capacity for love towards greater expansion of light in our lives. Spiritual growth is essentially maturing or ripening in the divine. That's textbook. Wow. Sorry, I was taking notes and wanted to go to the next paragraph. Sorry, everyone. No, don't apologize, Felicia. That's great. She wasn't shy. Did anyone else comment? Let's see. Oh, my sister says she's not watching from the bathroom. Thank goodness. But she could be. She could be lying. Because we're both from the same parents. Exactly. Oh, Vishwa's online. Vishwa Kumar. Okay. All right. Now let's finally open up the, well, so to speak, dive into the book and talk about what actually Theosophy actually is. So the word itself, it's a compound word, and it comes from, it's Greek, theos and sophia. And those two words mean divine wisdom. Theos and sophia, divine wisdom. It's important to define what the word yoga means. Yoga comes from the Sanskrit word, the root yug, which literally means union or communion. It also refers to a yoke. Now, in the olden days, when farmers had those oxen that would pull the plow, it's the wooden things that go over the oxen's neck, yoking them together. So why is yoga referring to a yoke or to yoking or to union or communion? Well, from the Bhagavad Gita, I'll quote, the yoking, yoga is the yoking of the powers of the body, mind, and soul to God. Yoking the powers of the body, mind, and soul to God. Now, that word yoga is similar to the root word of religion. Now, religion comes from Latin, the Latin word. Who knows where religion comes from? This is a quiz. Does anyone know the Latin word? You guys should know this.
Religare.
Religare or religare from a Las Vegas accent. Religare. Religion comes from religere, which means to link back or to bind. So we've talked about this idea of yoking the powers of the body, mind, and spirit to God. What does religion mean? To link back or to bind. What are we linking back to? Our source. So religion has the same core definition as yoga. I'm here to say that. Argue with me if you want. Yoga and religion mean the same thing. No. Maybe Vishwa will chime in on that one. My scholarly yoga friend. Charles Elkin has a comment. He's online. He says Carl Sagan was pretty much into just the physical universe. Sorry to say, not other levels of consciousness like Theosophy teaches. True. Yeah, he is much more of a physical person. So this divine wisdom that Theosophy refers to, the divine wisdom is said to be the similar component in all inner teachings of religions and most philosophies. If you look to the core teachings of all major religions, there are striking similarities. Striking similarities in the specific teachings and their origin, the origin stories. All right, so the Theosophical Society has been created to help disseminate this information. So Theosophy and the Society are two different things, but they're similar, of course. There is a society, as I mentioned earlier, and there's an international headquarters in India and a national headquarters in Wheaton, Illinois, just outside of Chicago. So I'm going to ask, let's see, who wants to read the three? Roger, do you want to read us the three objects?
If you turn around, they're on the wall.
All right. Let's see. Do you want me to read them?
Right.
There are no requirements to be a member of the Theosophical Society other than these three objects.
Right.
And they simply are to form a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity without distinction of race, creed, sex, caste, or color. Important note here, to form a nucleus. So by no means does the Theosophical Society claim to be the nucleus of universal brotherhood or the only organization by which the ancient wisdom is disseminated. It's a nucleus of the universal brotherhood of humanity. Number two, to encourage the comparative study of religion, philosophy, and science. So I want to specify that it's a very open-minded organization. It's a very open-minded practice. There is no dogma. Now, there are core beliefs, call them doctrine, if you will. There are beliefs that Theosophy presents for consideration, but there is no requirement. There's no dogma. And by no means does Theosophy claim to have the be all end all in terms of spiritual information. And then number 3, to investigate the unexplained laws of nature and the powers latent in humanity.
There's probably only one dogma that wouldn't make much sense if you didn't believe in it, and that is the brotherhood of all human beings, that we're all part of one divine being, and that we are inextricably linked to each other. So if you don't believe that, it probably won't make much sense to you to even investigate it. But other than that, there really is no requirement to believe in God or not believe in God or, you know, anything else. You don't even have to believe in karma or reincarnation. You know, we study that. A lot of Theosophists do believe in reincarnation and karma, but it's not a requirement.
That's right. That's okay. So I'm going to put it right back. Yeah.
One of the things that I've noticed the other day, a couple of my tenants had made comments that I'm probably the best landlord they'd ever had. I have blacks, Hispanics, whites, you name it in here, and I treat them all the same. It's nice to everybody, and they reciprocate. Back when I was over in Spain, I would sit down, and they usually had dinner at about 9 o'clock. So we'd go in around 7 and be early, and we would start talking some Spanish with some of the people. The owner would come around, sit down and talk to us about where we're going, what we're doing. So it's amazing when you treat everybody the same as you, how you get the response back from everyone. So that's my little spiel.
Thanks, Roger. The Theosophical Society has a motto, and that motto is, there is no religion higher than truth. In Sanskrit, Satyam Nasti Paro Dharma.
We have a necklace
Oh,
that
Says that.
okay.
says that, and I bought this necklace when we saw it, we loved it, and I bought it's from China and all different places, from temples, and they're made by hand, most of them. And what it says is exactly that. And to me, there's nothing higher than truth, and it connects with everything. And so I've been passing out these as gifts, and it's nice to see a group come together and many of us wearing this symbol. And it has the major symbols of the symbols from the major religions. It's very nice.
You know, that shows up in the
No, I didn't wear it.
that shows up in the Bible, where truth is set you free. It also goes clear back to Atlantean times, the law of one, where they were talking very similar stuff. So it's been around from millennium.
I think this idea of truth being more important than anything else in your life is extremely important, because for too many people, they will give lip service to that. They'll claim to search for the truth, but when it comes right down to it, sometimes they don't want to find out the truth because that's harmful to their ego. So one saying that I heard is, if an honest man discovers that he has been mistaken about one of his beliefs, one of two things will happen. He will either cease to be honest, or he will change his way of thinking and his way of acting to adopt the new truth that he found.
Now, this idea of truth is kind of funny, because how do you define truth? Truth actually is relative, right? So let's think about this for a second. One of our chapters in the book deals specifically with what we refer to as the constitution of man and the planes of our solar system. And there are different levels of consciousness, of vibratory frequencies. And you can define truth in whatever way makes sense to you. There are how many billions of people on the planet? 7 billion. So there are probably 7 billion truths. However, however, when you raise your frequency and your vibration of your own consciousness and awareness, it becomes true that whatever is higher in vibratory frequency and purity becomes more true than that which is more dense and more coarse and more rough. Where there is more suffering, life becomes less true and not less real, but less true. The absolute, God, whatever you call the divine for you, can be described as pure truth. Anything farther away from that is less true.
And it's characterized by pure bliss.
Correct. Unconditional bliss.
Complete lack of suffering. No suffering whatsoever.
The truth is relative and not absolute, only sat, or the absolute, of which nothing can be said, which is incomprehensible, inconceivable, indivisible, can be considered true. Ultimate truth is reality. We have a comment here from Felicia. On some level, we all know that we are one. As Joseph Campbell says, it is what allows a person to run into a burning building to save another, even a complete stranger, risking their own life to do so. Because in that moment, it is that subconscious or divine knowledge that we all possess that tells us that there is no difference between ourselves and other. We are all one. Truth is anything that enlightens and clarifies. Okay, I like that definition of truth. Truth is anything that enlightens and clarifies. Deception or Maya or illusion is anything that obscures and darkens. Truth reveals, lies distort. That's a very good definition of what is true and what is lie. Yeah, that's very similar to how Theosophy defines good and evil. And one of our chapters in the book is all about that. How do we define evil? How do we define good? And it can also be said, just very quickly, I'm jumping ahead several weeks here, just as Felicia said, anything that aids in the evolution of humankind and all of life, anything that aids in the upward evolution towards less suffering, towards expansion of consciousness is good. And anything that impedes that evolution is evil. So thank you, Felicia, for that. Since we've referenced several other chapters in the book, let's do a quick overview of what's to come. I want you to have a bird's eye view of the different topics that we'll be studying. So in this book, I mentioned there are 12 chapters. The first chapter, which is what we're doing today, is just defining Theosophy and talking about what it is, where it came from. The second chapter is about the society itself, and the third chapter is this idea of unity of life. How and why can life be considered to be all one? Chapter 4, it's titled Human Beings and Our Bodies, and that is specifically this constitution of man, or in yogic terminology, in Vedantic terminology, the koshas, or sheaths of the human being. The physical sheath being only 1/7 of the human being. The remaining 6, we can't detect with our eyes, ears, nose, mouth, only our higher sensitivity. So in the yoga world, we know very well what the pranic or energetic body is. Most of us who studied Theosophy have been exposed to the other levels of consciousness, or koshas, the mental plane, which has 2 subdivisions, the lower mind and the higher mind. And then there are several higher ones. So that chapter, Human Beings and Our Bodies, is all about that. Then we have a life after death chapter. Ooh, fun stuff. That's a good one. Controversial. Yeah. What is Bardo? Yeah, it is said that Bardo is the 4th phase of the human life, and that's the period from death to rebirth. It's a cycle.
Is that what word is that? What's the root of that?
Tibet.
It's a Tibetan word, Bardo. Yeah. You can think of it as 4 seasons of a year. Springtime would correlate to a child growing. Summertime would refer to the active years of a person's life, making the most difference they can in the world. Fall time would be the slowing down of an elderly person. And Bardo, or winter, would be rest before the next blossoming occurs. Chapter 6, Reincarnation, another real juicy, controversial one, which is fun. Karma, there's a whole chapter on karma. that might be my actual favorite chapter of the whole book, the idea of karma, which is very scientific. Chapter 8, the power of thought, how we can affect ourselves first and foremost, and then the world around us by learning to eliminate the ego and focus our mind. Chapter 9, the question of evil, which is what we just discussed. How can there be a God that is omnipotent, omnipresent, and omniscient? Did I get all those three? And yet there's terrible suffering in the world. Those are the topics we address in that chapter.
What is that word called?
What, omniscient?
The
Theodicy.
right?
Theodicy, the conundrum of how can a God that is those three things, all powerful, all wise, and everywhere, allow what we would consider to be tremendous suffering. So that's the key question of that chapter, the question of evil. So be sure to come for that class. Yes. Chapter 10 is called The Plan and Purpose of Life. That might be my favorite. Actually, they're all my favorite. Chapter 11, The Rise and Fall of Civilizations. Roger already mentioned Atlantis. And I know it's controversial, but it's interesting to talk about these ancient civilizations. There is striking evidence for 3 or 4 past civilizations, not only Atlantis. Lumeria, Hyperborea, so there's several. And then chapter 12 is the application of the ancient wisdom in the daily life. So that's the summing up of this text. Now, depending on how much we like to talk, it'll be at least 12 sessions, but probably more. Probably more. Welcome, Daniela.
Are you guys going to read the chapter before you get here? Or do we have to talk about the chapter when you're here by going over step by step by step? We'd like to have you guys.
Read it.
Yeah, read it.
They're short. It's like 3 pages each. Yeah,
They are.
they're very short.
Yeah.
Right. Hey, Natalie. Hey, Daniela. We've got lots of friends online. This is great. Facebook makes it so easy.
When we had our meeting, 3 weeks ago, we were thinking, how many people are going to show up here? Maybe 3, maybe 4. We make it 6 online.
Yeah.
We have more
Apparently it's
coming.
We have more coming.
Okay. Well, hopefully
I've
it's
got more chairs.
hopefully it's enjoyable. All right. I think it's important to also share let me ask you first, how many of you are familiar with Theosophy prior to this class? Have you heard of Theosophy before and studied a fair amount of it? So most of us, but some of us have not. Okay. I want to share, some of our online students probably have not heard of Theosophy before, so it's important to talk about where the information comes from. Well, truth being, we just made it all up. Yeah. Last week.
Believe it or not.
Right. We just woke up one morning and we just decided we're going to make up all this information. Yeah. No, it comes from several sources, and so a synthesis of many different writings and authors over the years. There are many theosophical authors, and many authors who have written books who are not claiming to be theosophists, but their work is 100% theosophy, like Eckhart Tolle, our favorite author. He doesn't mention the word theosophy one time in any of his writings or lectures, but his work is 100% spiritual growth theosophy. So it's a synthesis of literature. If you visit the national headquarters in Wheaton, Illinois, there's a gigantic library. It's like 2 stories high and it's huge. And there are tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of books. So any author can write theosophical material. They don't have to be approved by some, theosophical judge and say, this is theosophical, this is not. The information comes from the Vedas. So for some of our Sanskrit scholars and yoga enthusiasts, you'll know that the Vedas, it's a sacred body of Hindu texts, part of which are the Upanishads. It comes from Vedanta philosophy, Brahmanism. So a lot of the information in Theosophy comes from the ancient Hindu tradition. Other spiritual writings throughout the years, and then of course the authors and the teacher's own insight. So a big part of this information is presented from intuition, from our antakarana. Does anyone know what that vocabulary word means? The antakarana? It's our connection to our higher self, the antakarana. The bridge, the golden bridge, silver thread, some colored bridge. It's the connection that we have to our higher self. The stream that we enlarge, strengthen, that we can use to communicate, right? Our higher, we've all had instinct or intuition before. We've all felt something in our solar plexus or in our gut. We've felt something. Well, there is a distinction between instinct and intuition, but they are similar. And when we learn how to further that and to work with that, we can bring new information into this world. How do you think Einstein came up with E equals MC squared? And Stephen Hawking came up with his theories on black holes. He didn't just make it up one day. He was practicing jnana yoga, the yoga of the mind. He calmed his mind and he studied and he brought something new into this world from an opening. When you're present in the moment, when you are engaged in whatever it is that you're focused on, it's that sixth limb of Raja Yoga, focus, not worried about the past or anticipating the future. There's an opening that happens. And that opening is the antakarana from our higher dimension, our higher self, which is much better than we are at most things, sends information into the physical world.
Now, if you guys ask either of these two fellows, what time is it?
Oh, yeah.
They'll tell you.
It's now.
It's now. Right.
How do you spell antiquarian?
Antakarana.
Antakarana.
Karana.
We have someone online named Marie Antoinette Resurrected. Who the heck is that? Yeah, I know. I know. Rhonda says, I've heard of Theosophy before thanks to Terry, who has been talking about it for years, maybe 20 plus years. Antakarana. Yeah. So we're talking about where this information comes from. It also comes from a secret book. And now you might need to talk about the stanzas of Dzyan, but the foundation of lots of HPB's work comes from that.
Yes, true. And that is the basis of esoteric Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism. One thing you pointed out early in the class today is that Theosophy has two meanings. One is really the wisdom that has always existed. It is what gives us understanding of how life works, of how the creation of the cosmos takes place, of how humans developed, how they came about, how consciousness grows, how we grow and progress. That is Theosophy. So that has always existed. What we have today that we teach is the understanding of different teachers, some wiser and some more advanced than others. And each one imparts their understanding and their knowledge to their students and to the world. And little by little, we all progress in that direction to where one day we attain absolute truth. As Paul mentioned, truth is relative, but there is such a thing as absolute truth that is beyond anything we can even imagine. So the stanzas of Dzyan, which was the basis of the book H.P. Blavatsky wrote called The Secret Doctrine, it was really based on a very tiny fragment of the stanzas. And that is a book that is written in an ancient language. What is it called?
Senzar.
Senzar. And apparently the adepts know how to read and speak Senzar. And apparently H.P. Blavatsky knew to some extent, I don't know how well, but it's not any language that is disseminated or taught in the world today. So these sacred and secret writings are only available to very highly advanced pupils. And like I said, that is the basis of esoteric Tibetan Buddhism. And that's where she was trained in Tibet and in North India, which is sometimes referred to as Little Tibet, where it used to be called Little Tibet. Today we call it Kashmir.
I mentioned before that Theosophy is the comparative study of science, religion, and philosophy. So let's talk about how Theosophy and yoga correlate with science, and then with philosophy, and then with religion. So first of all, let's talk about Theosophy and yoga as religion. So we talked about already how the root word of religion is to link back to source, and that's what we study when we study the worldview and the purpose of our life through the lens of Theosophy and through the root word of what yoga means. That's where the similarities end, though, between Theosophy and yoga and religion. So the fact that they both mean to link us back and to give us a connection to our source is where the similarities end. Now, Theosophy and yoga differ from religion. To restate this, neither one claims to be the only way, as most religions do. Nor do they require any belief or creed, and Theosophy nor yoga is sectarian or dogmatic. Theosophy and yoga both respect the ultimate truth pointed to in all religions at their core. What Theosophy teaches us is that if you are a devout religionist, live your religion. Don't leave your religion to find something new. If you're born into a certain familial structure or societal situation where you're a religious person, don't go through the motions every Sunday or every whatever day of the week it is that you go to church, or on the Sabbath or Friday, whatever. Learn the purpose of the rituals that you practice. Learn where they came from. Why are there 3 candles here? Why is there frankincense like this? Why is there an altar boy cutting bread or whatever he does?
You're going to cause so many problems when you do that.
Hey, don't go through the motions. Don't be a sheep. Understand why the rituals and traditions are there. You might discover something. So don't leave the religion, but understand your religion. So neither Theosophy nor yoga tells you that you cannot be religious in nature.
What happens if you outgrow your religion?
The very fact of investigating will put that right in your face. We'll show you that. And that brings up a key point of yoga, which is non-attachment. Non-attachment. We don't need to hang on to what we thought was true for a good part of our lives. We have to be aware, okay, I see this and it was good for me for a lot of years, but maybe it's not good for me anymore. We have to be willing to let things go at an ultimate level. Yoga teaches us that we cannot reach final enlightenment unless we understand vairagya, or the idea of just letting go. And that applies to not only specifically physical things. Your new iPhone 10, if you drop it and breaks, you have to not cry about it. But how about the physical body? Let's get real here. How about a family member? Suffering is a choice. Physical pain can't always be avoided, but the suffering aspect of it is mind-made.
I was taught when I was a kid to be a good Southern Baptist, I had to have faith. And then I ran across this thing from the who was it? It was one of the groups that said, faith is having faith in somebody else's faith. And I thought, hey, that sounds like a very good thing.
We have a definition of faith also.
But what was the quote I sent you that was about 3 bad reasons to believe in something?
Oh, gosh, I don't remember that one.
One was tradition.
Oh, right.
One was faith, I think, and the other was authority. And yet that's what a lot of religions want you to do. You have to obey because that's what the authorities of the religion tell you, and they speak for God. So when they speak, they're speaking for God. You don't question, you just do it. So yoga and Theosophy are somewhat opposed to that. We teach you to investigate, to be willing to go against what you were taught as a child if you find that there is error in it.
The dogma.
Yeah, if you're completely caught up in it to the point that, well, there used to be a bumper sticker many years ago that I saw. God said it, I believe it, and that settles it. Well, that person will not ever change your life. They are set in concrete. and we can't grow. When we're setting concrete, we can't grow.
It's like this.
Yeah.
That's religion.
Yeah,
So
remember
we,
that.
there's no reason that we can't believe in religion, but we need to hold it very gently and be willing to change and to embrace a different religion or no religion if that's where our path leads us. It's this willingness to change our ideas and the way we interact in life that is so important with yoga.
One of the things that got me in trouble with Southern Baptists was I asked a question one time about, well, why did you think about talking about John the Baptist, who was Jesus' cousin, instead of Jesus? And nobody had an answer. It was like, just believe it. It's the truth. It's take it.
Oh, yeah, I, over the years, I've come to believe in any religion or honor any religion that honors a greater force, the universal force, God, Allah, whatever, however you want to perceive. And to me, I enjoy going to different religious ceremonies, and it taught me a lot. But I always believe, I don't care how you get to God. I say God or goddess. I don't care how you get there, just as long as you get there. Whatever route you take, it's great.
The main point is that we are already gods. We are divine. We came from a divine nature, and we're already divine. We're, as Paul said and has been saying, we are just trying to get back there, at least to regain the knowledge and the connection, get that connection reestablished. The purpose of life is to learn and to grow. And the only way we could do that is as divine beings was if we were cribbed, cabined, and confined. We had to lose our memory, so to speak, of what we were like previously in order to expand in consciousness and in experience. And the only way to do that is if we are repressed to some extent, to where we can fully appreciate our surrounding environment. And as we grow in that, we push the boundaries. And at some point we realize that connection is already there. I just have to strengthen it, and boom, it happens instantaneously. The last part of that connection happens instantaneously. So enlightenment occurs over a very long period of time, and yet that final bit, it just happens like that.
That brings up the last point of differentiation between Theosophy and religion, and that is that there is no instant enlightenment. There is no becoming full blown right away without putting in the laborious eons, and it is eons of work and learning and growth, slow climbing of the ladder or walking of the spiritual path. And that's different than what most religions talk about when we die, when the physical body dies, and we are joined, all of our questions will be answered, joined with God in heaven, and everything is perfect, and we're all knowing that. That's another big differentiator that we have. Theosophy says we have to work for it ourselves and learn it ourselves. We have to be the generals of our own army.
Yeah, I don't mean to imply that we, at our current state of advancement, can't expect to experience that final bit of enlightenment. That is way in the future. Way in the future.
Many
But as
more
Paul said, we go step by step by step. But one thing that does occur is little spurts where you'll have a jump in consciousness, and Eckhart Tolle experienced that. And other people, it's sometimes called cosmic consciousness.
Buddha did it.
And it is like a quantum leap in consciousness, and then it diminishes over time, but the overall effect is that it took you to a higher level of awareness. it takes usually a number of years for that to kind of percolate completely into your everyday life. But there is that jump in consciousness that does occur sometimes.
A similar phenomenon is a satori. Many of us might have heard of the term satori before. A flash of enlightenment or being touched by the divine.
Looks like we're stuck on religion.
That's all right, though. No, it's big. Now, okay, Theosophy as a science. So how do Theosophy and yoga relate to science? All right, they both would be involved in investigating the unexplained laws of nature and the powers latent in humanity. Now, the difference is, though, we don't need to prove our theories in a lab, in the scientific lab, with currently available scientific instruments. The whole definition of metaphysics and superphysics is just that it's beyond the current realm of physics, of physical awareness, physical science. You have to use your higher perception, our other senses, our other faculties. Is it safe? Instead of testing theories that we have in a petri dish, for example, or using a microscope, our current technology is lagging behind our spiritual technology. And we've actually come up with a time frame that science lags behind spiritual science. And what is 500 years maybe? In 500 years from now, current science will be able to detect prana, for example, thought forms, for example, the creation of the universe, what happened before the Big Bang. In a few hundred years, science will catch up to us spiritual people. And it's been happening for ever since the beginning of recorded history. Doctors used to be called magicians. They were alchemists. They were creating things that seemed to be magic. But now a doctor medicine changes things. It happens all the time. Technology now would be completely magic to someone 200 years ago. A car, a helicopter to someone 300 years ago would be like magic.
We do have to be extremely careful, though. There's a lot of woo-woo science in the metaphysical and esoteric community. And a lot of ideas and philosophies and opinions about things that are completely off the wall and really not very useful. A lot of them, checked very carefully, a lot of them appeal to the ego. If it's something that appeals to the ego, it's probably not really spiritual. So always watch that very carefully. And we find, and this is where it's so important in Theosophy and in Raja Yoga, you can only see clearly when you get rid of the ego. As long as ego is a powerful part of your sense of being, you're never going to be able to see completely clearly. And that's because it gives you prejudices, and you make justification for your actions. You're making excuses for this and that, and you're not being totally honest. Down deep inside somewhere, you know it's not the case, and yet you stick to it because your ego requires it. Once you start working on that ego and diminishing it, your vision gets much, much better. And that's the only way that you can be sure that you're seeing clearly and on the path to achieving a better level of understanding truth in the universe. And as far as science is concerned, science likes to teach that you have to be able to show somebody else how you achieved something, and they should be able to do it the same way.
Provable and
Reproducible.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And in esoteric science, which is what we study, that is absolutely true too. But it has to be someone who has achieved that same level of advancement. And because of people's ego, they like to believe they've achieved a certain level of advancement when in fact they haven't. So they argue amongst themselves as to what is true and what is not. When you have made a certain certain amount of growth, spiritual growth, you will find that other people in your life can't relate to that. It separates you from other people. But you have to be willing to do that if you're going to continue. On the other hand, don't take that as a sign that you're more important or, I'm better than they are because I've achieved this. In fact, if you ever feel like you have to prove it to someone else, then you're still lower than you think you are. Be willing to achieve something and be completely silent about it, not even share it with other people.
That's the test.
The way they see it is in your actions, in the way you comport yourself in life. If that has changed, they will notice it. They won't be able to put their finger on it, and there's no need for you to try to explain it. They will feel it, they will sense it, and they will see it. So don't try to prove it with words, prove it with the change in the way you are.
And if somebody cuts you off in traffic, don't prove it with your finger. But we need to talk about philosophy.
We do. There are a couple of questions. Before you turn the camera off of you for 1 second, though, there are a couple of things online that I missed. First of all, Felicia has been very helpful here. When speaking about religion, I didn't notice her comment, but she says fear has to be the worst reason to have faith. Fear-based religions.
I just read a comment online about that today. Someone who said, I've been thinking about it. And the more I think about it, the more I realize that the reason people are so adamant about their religious beliefs is because of fear.
You're going to go to hell if you're not careful.
Not only that, but they're afraid that they won't be with their family members. They're going to lose their family. They're going to lose their friends. They're going to lose their position in life. It's based entirely on fear. And there are always people who are willing to take advantage of people's weaknesses. Being fearful is a weakness. It's no different from having an addiction to alcohol or something. There's always someone who's willing to take advantage of that. And there are any number of people who claim to be great religious teachers or prophets or gurus too, who are willing to take advantage of that. And it usually involves money, doesn't it? And some of these people become fabulously wealthy because of that. Be based on other people's fears.
Speaking about reaching different levels of enlightenment, still on you for a second. Rhonda asks, and I'm sure she's smiling right now. She asks, is there such a thing as being slightly enlightened? Sorry, just had to interject a bit of inside humor. Well, I'm going to say yes, but what would you say?
Well,
Obviously, yes.
I don't claim to be enlightened, and slightly is about the best I could claim to be.
And I think Eugene is logged in under Ancient Wisdom. He asks, so do most organized religions fall into that category? Is that an unfair standard? And then Felicia says, fall into which category? And then he says, an untruth because they create separation and ego. Well, I think
that's just it. A lot of religions at the core have had a teacher who was quite enlightened. And we have the Kabbalah, we have esoteric Christianity, we have esoteric Buddhism, we have the Buddha himself, we have the Christ. We have teachers who have achieved a certain degree of enlightenment. Where the enlightenment ends is when that person is no longer among us in a living physical body. And someone else steps in to speak on their behalf. That's where things start to go wrong. Whenever you have someone who claims by whatever right that they are speaking for God or for any other enlightened being. You could even be claiming to be channeling one of the higher teachers, and unless it shows up in your everyday life, I tend to be very suspicious of that. So that's what I think is that everything is changing. If you ever think that the philosophy is going to always be concentrated in this organization or that organization or this church or that religion, you're wrong. It's going to be somewhere at a particular time, focused somewhere at a particular time, and at a different point in time, it's going to be focused in something else. So you have to be aware enough and astute enough to find where that is. And where it really is within you.
Okay. We are running over, and if anyone has to go, we completely understand. It's time now, but we're not done with, as I've warned many times, we need to finish a couple more things. So if you have to leave, we totally understand. No problem. My mom is there too. She didn't want me to forget about it. Well, because she didn't say anything. So Mom, offer your opinions. Yeah, it's always good. She's usually here in person. And by the way, she comes to all of my hot yoga classes too. My mom's great. So
She doesn't trust in
wrapping up Theosophy as a science, there's a great quote from the book. Every great scientific discovery was first a grand intuition. So once it's intuited, then it's proven to the masses. Now let's talk about the last category, Theosophy and yoga relating to philosophy. The similarities. They all three postulate logical explanations. Let's take away the word logical. They all three postulate an explanation for the universe and its laws, as well as humanity's origin, evolution, and destiny. What at one time is religion or philosophy will be science at another time. So that's where the similarities, let's see, and a couple of concepts of Theosophy from a philosophical perspective. Parallel universes and the multiverse theory, quantum physics and string theory, different planes of existence, meditation and telepathy, thought as a creative force, and life after death. In the olden days, there wasn't much of a distinction, as I mentioned before, between religion, science, and philosophy. The religion was the authority. The high priest has as much, if not more, power than the kings in the early days. In the Age of Enlightenment, the Age of Reason, and the Renaissance, the 14th through the 18th century Europe, the priests had the power. So, anything else to add on philosophy? I'm trying to go a little bit quicker since we realized what's happening with time here. No? Good? Okay.
I could say more than that.
I want to define some vocabulary words that we'll be using quite a bit. We've been throwing around the word metaphysics a little bit today. Let's just define it so we're all on the same page. Anything metaphysical in nature is something that is simply beyond the physical, the underlying theoretical principles of a subject. Esoteric. What does esoteric mean? It's hidden or concealed, the secret teachings or information, something that's not widely available. Theosophy could be considered esoteric, but not by choice. We want it to be exoteric. We want the world to know about these inner teachings. They shouldn't be the inner teachings at all, but what religions?
They have to start they have to start that way, and then as it becomes more disseminated, as people grow, as the world around us grows in their ability to perceive, then it becomes exoteric. But there's always going to be someone going ahead. Those persons are going to be the few that are in advance of the rest of humanity. That's just how it works.
And now we come to the word occult, not cult, but occult, O-C-C-U-L-T, and the occult sciences. So it's important to know that this word has nothing to do with the word cult. Occult sciences has to do with, again, similar to esotericism, something that's hidden, not obvious. A scientist of nature or a metaphysician. Some occult sciences include Hermeticism, the Kabbalah, some aspects of yoga philosophy, and as Terry mentioned, esoteric Buddhism and esoteric Brahmanism. So if you hear us talking about occult studies, we're not talking about joining a cult, don't worry.
A cult is very specific. It's
A cult?
A cult.
A
yeah,
cult.
It always has a central figure who demands complete subjugation to them. Always involves money. Always involves total obedience. You have to do exactly what they tell you to. And my favorite definition of a cult is a group or organization that will not let you leave with your integrity intact.
We know certain religions that have that. Okay, a few last terms before we wrap up. Dogma, we've talked about that. A prescribed doctrine proclaimed as unquestionably true by a particular group. We've talked about what the ageless wisdom is. Spirit. Now, the word spirit, there's so many contexts, and it can be quite an ambiguous word. We can define spirit as anything that is closer to the absolute, closer to truth, as opposed to farther away from truth. And we have a beautiful graph that we created for our book that we're going to show in a subsequent class for those of you who are more visual learners. So again, spirit is anything closer to the absolute, finer vibrating, and this is matter. Spirit and matter are interchangeable, and less that which is farther away from it is less spiritual in nature, less dense versus more dense. And the last thing I want to define is enlightenment. That's a word that is kind of commonly thrown around in all circles of spirituality. What does enlightenment actually mean? Well, the word itself literally means to become luminous or to be made less dense. So we've talked about several ways to do that so far. Raising our vibrations creates a less dense physical form. Now, we'll learn that spirit and matter are one and the same thing. It's more dense at lower levels, less dense at higher levels. So becoming luminous or enlightened is to make yourself less dense or to make something less dense. And that has everything to do with the way you think, the way you act, the way we speak. It changes our vibrations, and we started to change our vibrations by harmonizing, by chanting Om, by calming ourselves down, relaxing. Think about the idea of someone who's just a stress ball. We have friends like that who are always tense and uptight, and they couldn't meditate to save their lives. That's someone who's dense and tight and coarse. Their vibrations are really rough. And we also probably know people who are very calm and almost saint-like. Some of us have friends like that, who they're unflappable. They almost kind of vibrate at a higher level. And there are even bumper stickers that say that. Raise your vibration, dude. Like, vibrate higher. That's what they're talking about. They're talking about becoming enlightened. Lighten yourself up. Relax. The vibrations that you create by your thoughts and physical body, emotions, they can be of various degrees of frequency and amplitude. Once we learn to calm them down and refine them, that is the process of becoming enlightened. That is raising your vibrations and becoming a more spiritual being. It also has to do with awakening, expanding your consciousness, reaching levels of consciousness that where to such a degree where earthly life might not actually be necessary. And we'll talk about that more with the adepts, where you reach a stage of advancement that the physical body might not be needed anymore. That's a high level of enlightenment. Okay. There are more things, but there will be more classes. So
Are we going to talk about the fundamental concepts next time?
You're going to
Sure.
have to. We've got 19 of them.
19 fundamental
So look
concepts?
forward to 'em.
Yeah. Let's see. There are a lot of good ones. You guys will have to get the book. But
What's
All
the
right.
name of your book again?
the book that we wrote,
Yeah.
it's called Ancient Wisdom for a New Age, a practical guide for spiritual growth. Any last comments or questions before we wrap up?
One thing I think we need to let everybody know is you put this book out on the internet?
I put chapter 1.
Oh, chapter 1
Yeah.
out on the internet? Okay. So chapter 1's on the internet, so you can go over the 19 concepts.
All right, everyone. I really appreciate all of your attention and attendance to our online people and in person. For all of us here physically, can we do an email list, please? I know I have some of your emails in different places, but everyone that's here today, I'd like to do a master list, and I will pass that around. To our online folks, you guys are awesome. Thank you, Felicia. Thank you, Mom. Everyone that commented. Marie Antoinette resurrected.
Yes. Oh, okay.
You know, didn't you ever say to someone that's really heavy, you know, oh, lighten up.
Lighten up, exactly. Thank you so much. I don't think we do, but we will order some.
How much is your book? You want to
15.
share?
The soft cover is 15 and the hard cover is 20.
15 or 20?
The one that you use.
Right.
No, the one that we use is 10. This one here is $10. Okay.
No,
No, the one, the red one.
Ours, yeah.
15 for the soft?
15 for the soft cover.
15. Okay,
To whom do we give the money? For the book?
right here. I'm
You're the money man? Thanks. Okay?
Wonderful.
Right, is that for
Thank
sale?
you all so much.
Is it for sale?
Is what?
Is it for sale today?
Wait,
I didn't bring any.
with us?
Roger, do you have any of our? We'll bring them next time. I should have brought some, but
The red, the one that.
the book that we wrote. Yeah.
Deliver one to you. I don't have it with me today, but I can deliver it to you, to your.
Well, I could, well, I'll see if, well, okay, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
If you wanna do
Yeah, I
that.
can do that.
Now, I can pay you today for it,
All right.
Or later, either way.
but the red one that you use.
Right.
Okay.
All right. Signing off. That was great. Facebook Live is that was so easy.
Yeah.
We have 46 comments on here that it went up to 12. We had a total of 15 people online. That's cool. Yeah.